Hello and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being covered in the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined this week by Thad Greenson, news editor, and Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, arts and features editor at the North Coast Journal. Welcome, guys.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Pretty good, I suppose. Despite the, drumbeat of war in the air, that's probably a big cloud looming over all the news all the time. Great world we live in these days. It's pretty awful. But other than that, doing our best to hang in there and get fresh air up here in Humboldt when we can. Why don't we just dive right in, Thad? Why don't you tell us what's on the cover of this week's North Coast Journal?
We're just going to dive into the local awful.
Local stuff. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that, please.
Not all of it's awful. We took a break from awful this week a little bit. So this week we have a cover story from Jay Savage, a freelancer we work with regularly, who took a deep dive into the draft environmental impact report for Nordic Aqua Farm's proposed fish farm out on the Samoa Peninsula.
Awesome.
So for folks who haven't been following it, Nordic is proposing to build a massive onshore fish farm. So this isn't like they're going to be growing fish in pens in the natural environment. They have these a modular facility that they're proposing to build, and it would be entirely on land. And the county of Humboldt actually already signed off on the project, saying that it essentially wouldn't have any negative environmental impacts. But there was enough concern in environmental communities locally that Nordic kind of took the proactive step of going to a full draft environmental impact report, which is kind of a much more thorough vetting of the potential impacts of it. And so Jay did a wonderful job, wrote actually two pieces that are kind of put together in the cover story. And so one of them is just kind of looking at the facts of what the environmental impact report has in it, what it assesses as kind of the potential impacts, how those concern environmental groups, and kind of what the environmental groups are pushing to have the company do instead. And so I encourage folks to read the full article because it's pretty comprehensive. But the biggest concern, I think, by far, I guess two huge concerns. The primary one is that this facility would take a ton of electricity to power, and when fully operational, it would actually take as much about 21% of the Humboldt County's current electric grid. So it by itself can command more power than I think Fortuna and Eureka combined, which is just kind of an astounding figure.
So you said there's this 1,800-page report that they did voluntarily in the name of full disclosure, but that also there's this coalition of groups that are aligned to scrutinize that report and pick out some of the areas for attention that maybe need to get revisited. What are some of their biggest critiques or observations about the farm's plan?
Yeah, there's a variety of concerns they have. I think the two biggest are outflow of water from the facility and the energy footprint of the proposal. It's hard to overstate kind of the size of this project. I mean, it would be I think it would be the largest. It would be the largest onshore fish farm in the United States. It's built of these modular components, and it would be entirely on land. So it's not like the hemmed in farming facilities that I think we've seen, and I think we most are accustomed to seeing or thinking about with fish farms. It's entirely enclosed and entirely onshore, and the project is, it has tremendous pumping and cooling machinery that needs a ton of electricity. They have plans to install solar panels at the facility, but those would only basically power 3% of the project, and they want them to commit to powering the other 97% with renewables, which is complicated in Humboldt County. As we know, we are isolated kind of from the rest of PG&E's electric grid. We can't transport massive amounts of power in here. So there's a lot of talk about kind of how that would work. And it also kind of gets into a chicken and egg thing with the with the proposed wind farm offshore, that project would absolutely have enough energy to supply Nordic's project, but it hasn't been built yet, and so Nordic can't exactly bank on a project that hasn't been approved or much less built. So that's a large concern. And then the other one is basically the fish farm operates by pumping in massive amounts of both fresh water and salt water from the bay that it uses to fill its tanks. But then because the fish are in an enclosed environment, that water needs to be cycled out really quickly. And so it would produce, I think, about 12 million gallons a day of outflow water that the company is proposing be put through a pipeline and dumped. I think it's about a mile offshore. And environmental groups have concerns about that because of both the nutrient content of that water and the temperature of that water would be different than surrounding waters, and so they have concerns about the potential of it causing algal blooms and things like that. I think those are the two biggest concerns. There's certainly lots of others, from vehicle trips to overall carbon footprint. Once you factor in kind of the carbon cost of shipping all this stuff across the West Coast and stuff like that.
One of the elements of the article, which I think, again, like you said, is really worth reading because there's a lot in there, is that this is kind of a high point when it comes to an industrial scale project, because in the past, usually companies would kind of railroad through their plans without much concern for public consent. They would do what was minimally necessary, and in this case, it's all apparently being done in good faith. So I think there's a lot in there which is pretty neat. What does the article say, or what do you know about kind of next steps in the process in terms of like addressing some of these citizen points that they raised?
Yeah, so I think that your point is spot on. This is a really unique example of both both the company and local environmental nonprofits taking not a take it or leave it approach, but really trying to kind of meet in the middle and find ways to mitigate each other's concerns. And so the process forward is going to be really interesting from that in that vein. So now the public comment period has closed, and so all of these different groups and individuals and municipalities have kind of read through this document and opined about it, and said, weighed in on either their concerns or the things that they feel like the document fails to address. And now it's Nordic's turn to kind of go through all of those comments, and it is required to respond to all of them. So that might take new layers of study if they feel like there are questions that are unanswered and they don't have the answers to. And then, that will go to kind of a public hearing where the focus of the hearing, it wouldn't be approving the project necessarily, but it would just be looking at whether this document kind of adequately summarizes the impacts of this proposed project. And then, the groups would, the parties would continue to kind of negotiate what they feel like would be an acceptable outcome.
All in good faith. Wow. So there's a lot still in store. Thank you for bringing this to our community's attention and for the work that you guys do to follow it.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to Jay Savage, who I think did a really nice job on the piece.
So there's a couple other things you guys are following in the news this week. It's busy week. You want to tell us a little bit about the article that you guys prepared that has to do with our controller auditor in our county? Yeah,
I won't get too far into the weeds on this one because there are a ton of weeds, and I'd encourage folks just to come take a look at the story. But yeah, so news broke on Friday that our embattled auditor controller, Karen Paz Dominguez, who's been under pretty steady fire from a number of fronts really for the last couple of years, got a letter from the Attorney General's office of California threatening to fine her personally $5,000 if she couldn't turn in this basically this end of year financial report from the fiscal year 2019-2020, which remains outstanding and is mandated that it be filed with the state every year. The county has been working on trying to get it together, has been working with outside consultants, and just has not been able to finish this thing. And so finally, kind of the AG's office laid down this gauntlet of you have 20 days or else we are going to fine you. And Paz Dominguez responded by sending a letter to Humboldt County taxpayers that she distributed through the media that basically kind of, said that the county's finances are not okay and the county's financial controls are not okay, and that she was ready to, kind of lay her proverbial cards down on the table at the Board of Supervisors meeting on Tuesday. So then on Tuesday, Paz Dominguez and actually the county administrative officer reported, ironically, that they determined that this letter was kind of sent in error. And that the AG's office was acting out of step with the state controller's office, which has been working with the county of Humboldt on this end of year fiscal report and also in doing an investigation into the county's financial controls. But nonetheless, Paz Dominguez then kind of went through her quote unquote findings from her own audit and really lobbed a ton of allegations in a whole bunch of directions about the county just having kind of improper financial controls in place. Everything from the way it tracks petty cash to way certain departments track cash deposits and their sources. And, her take is that kind of the county is very at risk of fraud on multiple levels. And so the Board of Supervisors feeling a little bit blindsided by this information because it didn't receive kind of a written report beforehand, and Paz Dominguez didn't kind of show her work or bring in evidence of these claims, has kind of asked her to come back at a future meeting, I think on March 15th, to kind of detail everything that she said and kind of bring the receipts and show, some evidence for what she's saying.
Wow. So like you said, there are a lot of, there's a thicket here of allegations and even competing perceptions of what the state is demanding of us and when. So I guess, like you said, that there's more to the story that we'll see and will unfold probably between now and that next supervisors meeting, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
There's going to be a lot there. And yeah, the March 15th meeting is one to circle on the calendar.
Oh my goodness. How about we, do you want to say something super briefly about COVID, or do you want to just kind of hand over to our colleague, Jen?
Yeah, I promise I'll keep it super brief. But the
COVID or me, those are your choices.
The state has announced that it is dropping the mask mandate for schools beginning in a couple weeks. And so it will then be up to local school districts to decide if they want to keep masking orders in place. So a lot of the focus is going to shift to boards of education and moving forward. See what they say.
Yeah, again, to be determined. Thanks for covering this and keeping us in the loop on all these interesting, fascinating stories. You got it. So, Jen, what's going on the Arts and Features beat this week?
Well, this week I have been looking at a couple of new restaurants that, new. Are they really new? A couple of changes in our restaurant scene. The first of which is one that I occasionally get like texts from people and they're like, what is up with this? But, people I know who are like, please tell me. I'm sure that people are texting Thad and being like, is it safe to go to the supermarket without a mask? And people are contacting me and being like, what is with hole in the wall? With equal urgency, let me tell you. So you may have driven by on Broadway in Eureka, the sign that usually says hole in the wall, which, by the way, that sign is like a killer. Because you're driving, and you missed it.
Yeah. It's an alley.
There are people behind you. So anyway, that sign has changed to be Pile High Deli, Panic, Bedlam in the streets. And as I said in the article, people just crushing potato chips in their angry fists. But in fact, not that much has changed. Long ago, in 1991, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, John Forrest bought this, franchise location, although it doesn't really operate the way a franchise operates, but bought the hole in the wall, including the name, from the Arcata folks who owned both of them, and they operate separately. So this place has been running, but he knew that if he ever had to sell it, he would have to change the name. Time went by. Now he's going to sell it. And right now, Jesse Galloway, who's the manager, who's been making sandwiches there for 2 years, he's in line to buy it. The turnover should happen around April, but that's all, escrowy, wobbly calendar stuff. But you know how hard it is to buy something. It's tricky. But they've changed the name preemptively. He's running the place, and it's going to stay the same. They've been stuffing people's sandwich bags with flyers explaining the whole thing, and yet the panic is so real. People have their sandwich. They want it to be the same. They want it to not change. And I am here to tell you, I went and I ate a sandwich and it is exactly the same thing that it has been for the decade that I've been here, at least. I know, and I'm looking at your face, David.
Okay.
And you cannot hide your jersey in this moment.
Sorry.
It's called Pile High Deli. It's not a deli, like they're not in there slicing meat. So that's not going to change. It's going to be all that sort of like pre-made assembly line sandwich situation. But the bread distributor is the same. The way they do everything is the same. It's the same sandwich. And I talked to Jesse Galloway and John Forrest about it. And a couple of things were interesting about it. One thing that I learned is that Jesse Galloway eats 5 to 7 sandwiches a week from that restaurant. God bless him. And also, which, makes sense. It tracks. Natalie from Happy Donuts eats like a donut or two a day. What are you going to do? You're sitting there in front of donuts. But also, unlike a lot of other restaurants that have struggled during COVID and have struggled on that corridor with all the fast food opening up, Hole in the Wall / Pile High has done well and actually increased business during the pandemic.
Good deal.
As a grab and go institution, they didn't have to really change their rules much. They had to have distance between people. They had to have masking in the place. But other than that, it's not like you sit down and eat. The only table is picnic tables outside. So they really didn't have to change their business model very much. And people switched from sit down places to grab and go in a lot of cases, or someplace where they knew they could eat outside. So they did pretty well under the circumstances, and, are feeling pretty good about the future. The other place that I checked out is way down in Garberville. On my way out of town, I made my whole family stop so that we could run into Il Forno. And there you are on the main drag of Garberville, looking at, the Garberville Theater and a lot of empty storefronts and, dusty streets and everything. And it's looking a little rough around the edges. Let's not pretend. And Il Forno is this pretty schmancy bakery in the middle of this whole place. And it's very good. I talked to Chris Valk, who is the owner. She also owns the, what is it called? It's the Chimney Tree Grill on the Avenue of the Giants. And she took over the spot that used to be Treats, and it's all been redone inside. And it's very pretty. And there are many tasty things inside.
Sweet.
I was tempted enough by the cannoli that I ate it in the car wearing all black. I was covered. It was full Scarface by the time I was done. But it's the legit old-fashioned traditional cannoli. And there's that, David, I know you know that sound when you bite into
totally.
a cannoli. And it's
That's my
that
birthday.
Sort of,
That's my birthday treat.
really?
Yeah, tell us about the bite. I would love to hear it.
It is that like muted crackle. And when I bit into it, I was like, I get it. I get it now why people are on YouTube listening to ASMR tapes. Like you just want to hear this sound over and over again. It's so satisfying. Also wonderful, these big biscuits that are topped with a dollop of strawberry or fig jam. And they're like a little bit salty, but very crusty. They are not a biscuits and gravy style biscuit. They are a pastry-like biscuit. Great big, huge honkin' croissants. Occasionally donuts. There were no donuts when I was there. If you are able to have the Score Bar donut, please immediately send me pictures. I need to know. But it's a really interesting setup, and Chris Valk really wanted to make something nice and special and just like top of the line in Garberville. And she said, we deserve something good down here. We deserve, not that there aren't other good things down there. But her baker gets there at 2 a.m. so they can open up at 6. It's wild and really, really worth a stop. So if you are in Garberville, shame on you for not eating it already. And if you're going through Garberville, absolutely make a stop. It's really great.
Well, I didn't even know they were there, so I'm totally psyched to go try it. Thank you for experimenting and sharing the love. I'm definitely going to go check out their cannolis, and I hope other people do too.
Always willing to take one for the team, David.
Right on. Well, with that, I think we are out of time this week. Both you, Thad and Jennifer, thank you so much for keeping us in the loop and the work that you do at the North Coast Journal.
Thank you, David.
North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick one up, stay informed. Always available 24/7 online, so you can always check them out there too. With that, thank you again, and take care till next week. Bye, guys.